that can be achieved when we work together. This summer, United States partners laid the groundwork for the release of 15 Armenian detainees by Azerbaijan. At the same time, Armenia provided maps for mined territories to Azerbaijan. Our goal has always been to do what we can to support common action to advance the common good. All our advances have one simple goal in mind: European and Euro-Atlantic integration. We will not rest until we achieve EU and NATO membership. This means we will continue to reform and modernize every aspect of our democracy and economy to align with the highest global standards. Our path to European and Euro-Atlantic structures is a homecoming, a civilizational choice. An absolute majority of our population strongly supports this destiny for our country. Our historic decision to join the European and Euro-Atlantic family is the core principle that guides our foreign policy. Especially since 2012, Georgia has made great strides in advancing democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. All our fundamental values we share with the European institutions. We have prepared a comprehensive action plan, packed with initiatives and reforms that will lead to our application for EU membership in 2024. For that, I would like to thank our European and international partners that have shown strong and steadfast support to Georgia for all these years. Since 2012, we have held 6 democratic elections, and each one has been declared free and fair by international election observers. In fact, in a few days' time, we will once again be holding a free, fair, and democratic nationwide municipal election. Since the last time we met in person here at the UN, democracies around the world have been under pressure, if not assault. Irrational and, I would say, dark forces have been at work, often aided and abetted by outside saboteurs. Regardless of the source, we must hold to the democratic path. Elections are often passionate and hard-fought, and feelings run high. Yet when elections are free and fair, the winners must be gracious, and those who lose must abide by the will of the people. If we cannot believe in elections, then democracy itself is in peril. So I call on everyone here today who cares for democracy, for progress, for free and fair elections, to participate with passion in your political system. And when the dust has settled, as we say, and a winner is declared, respect the will of the people, close ranks, and work to move your country forward. The challenge to democracy is not the only challenge facing us. In Georgia, we have achieved much, but of course, more remains to be done. First and foremost, we must create more jobs. At the same time, we must remain dedicated to investing in education and infrastructure, eradicating poverty, strengthening our health system, and diversifying our industrial, service, and agricultural sectors. As I have outlined, Georgia is on the move. We are on the right track. We are overcoming COVID, and we have a long-term plan in place to strengthen our democracy, economy, and society. Yet I'm reaching out to you all today to put an end to the illegal occupation of Georgian sovereign lands by Russia. Not only is Russia occupying 20% of Georgian territory, but is also actively seeking to undermine our aspirations to join the European and Euro-Atlantic family. While our commitment to be a true global citizen is unstoppable and cannot be hindered by outside forces, the very freedom we have fought so hard for is being challenged every single day. On our very own soil, in the Abkhazia and Tskhinvali regions, we are observing a humanitarian crisis. And the responsibility, of course, resides only with the occupying power. This year, the European Court for Human Rights ruled its verdict and found the Russian Federation guilty of occupying and exercising effective control over 2 Georgian regions and responsible for human rights violations in Abkhazia and Tskhinvali. Today, I call on the international community to act in concert to address the violations of fundamental principles of international law in the occupied territories, and with joint efforts, facilitate the implementation of the EU-mediated August 2008 ceasefire agreement. Every day, Georgian land continues to be subject to, as we call it, creeping annexation and so-called borderization. This includes kidnappings, illegal detentions, unlawful restrictions on freedom of movement, and deprivation of the right to education in the native tongue, particularly in the Gali region. During COVID-19, this made the medical evacuations virtually impossible. All these actions carry an unbearable burden for those living on both sides of the razor-wired fences. This must be seen for what it is: a pre-planned ethnic cleansing to drive ethnic Georgians out. This must be stopped. In the occupied territories, we have a real humanitarian crisis, while on the other side, we have land that is being cultivated, where the younger generation have access to world-class education, top-level infrastructure, and thriving businesses. We want to see the same opportunities and prospects for development and prosperity for the young generation in the Abkhazia and Tskhinvali region. For this very reason, we developed a Step to a Better Future, a peace initiative to improve the livelihoods of people living in the Abkhazia and Tskhinvali regions. We believe that only through sustainable peace and security will our fellow citizens have a better future. It is through peace and stability that economies can start to thrive and our people prosper together. That is why I want to address our Abkhaz and Ossetian brothers and sisters and say that our true strength is in cooperation and unity, which is exactly why our foes want us divided and apart. We have a common history and are part of a common homeland, Sakartvelo. We should jointly define our common future as well. We should build our country together and peacefully turn it into a truly democratic, prosperous, and future-oriented European society. From a geopolitical perspective, the Black Sea region is growing ever more than important. The Black Sea is on the front lines of a dynamic regional chess match. It is a microcosm of conflict management. And I would say that if we can maintain peace and stability here, we can do so elsewhere. Therefore, our goal is to ensure peace and stability in the entire region. In the South Caucasus, I propose what I'm calling the Peaceful Neighborhood Initiative to promote stability in our region. This format will facilitate dialogue and confidence building and lead to the implementation of practical solutions to regional issues of common interest with our US and EU partners. Georgia stands ready to host an international gathering in Tbilisi to discuss the prospects of our Peaceful Neighborhood Initiative, involving our South Caucasian neighbors, our brothers, and international partners. Let's begin with some small steps to build trust, and then we can move toward resolving other regional and global issues together. A sustainable peace and a common strategic outlook for the South Caucasus will benefit the wider Black Sea region and enhance broader European and global security. Dear friends, let me conclude where I began. We are here today as a testament to the power of collective action. Whether it is the fight against the pandemic, financing development to advance quality of life, or the need of collective action to maintain peace, we must act together to live together, and there is no other alternative. I remain confident that working together, we will succeed. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of Georgia for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Australia to introduce an address by the head of government.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the high honour and distinct privilege to introduce the statement of the Honourable Scott Morrison MP, Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Australia.
Mr. President, it is a pleasure to give Australia's national statement to the General Assembly. Here in Canberra, I'm on the ancient land of the Ngunnawal people, one of Australia's many Indigenous peoples who have cared for this continent for 60,000 years. Our First Peoples remind us that caring for country and for each other is the essence of our shared humanity. The past year has been one of extraordinary adversity, as the world has struggled and dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic, and it continues to rage. Yet it has also borne witness to humanity's remarkable resilience and creative ability to overcome problems, to deliver solutions. Each generation navigates its own destiny amidst anxiety and hope. Ours is no different. Today, I would like to speak about three of the most pressing global challenges that together we face. Challenges that shape our times. Mr. President, COVID-19 has tested the world like nothing in our lifetime. We mourn the millions lost and millions more who have suffered such terrible illness. After so much heartache and so much sorrow, there is hope now and a way forward. The development of a safe and effective vaccines, so many of them, has been one of the greatest achievements of modern times. Our collective task, though, now is to roll that out, a global vaccine rollout, the largest in world history. Here in Australia, more than 70% of our adult population has had the first dose of the vaccine, and more than half will have had 2 doses. We know vaccinations work. They lower the risk of transmission. They significantly lower the risk of hospitalisation, severe illness and death. And high vaccination rates are the pathway to taking back so much of what we have lost and to living with this virus confidently, safely, securely and prosperously. Vaccinations are the key to keeping our neighbours safe also. Australia has been helping countries across our region battle this pandemic with personal protective equipment, testing equipment, medical personnel. And now we're doing everything we can to help them with access to safe and effective vaccines. None of us is safe unless all of us are safe. So this is the most urgent priority for Indo-Pacific nations. Already we've delivered more than 3 million doses to countries across our region, and millions more doses are on their way. We've also contributed $130 million to the COVAX Advanced Market Commitment, which has delivered over 51 million doses to Southeast Asia and 1.7 million doses to our Pacific family in Timor-Leste. And we're investing more than $620 million to procure millions of vaccine doses and providing technical advice, training of health workers and cold chain support to our friends and our neighbours. Now, this includes a $100 million contribution to the Quad vaccine partnership with our good friends the United States, India and Japan. This will support a boost in production by at least 1 billion doses by the end of 2022 and provide access to vaccines and delivery support to countries across the Indo-Pacific. This is the right thing to do. It will help slow the spread of the virus and, we hope, prevent variants emerging. As well, we must prevent future pandemics, and Australia supports the calls for a stronger, more independent World Health Organisation with enhanced surveillance and pandemic response powers. This should be the duty of every single member of the World Health Organisation to share that ambition for a World Health Organisation that can seek to protect us all in these circumstances. And we also need to accelerate efforts to identify how COVID-19 first emerged. Australia called for an independent review and sees understanding the cause of this pandemic not as a political issue, but as being essential simply to prevent the next one. We need to know so we can prevent this death and this calamity being visited upon the world again. That can be our only motivation. Mr. President, COVID-19 has underscored the vital importance of international cooperation and coordination. The patterns of cooperation that have sustained our prosperity and security for decades, they're under increasing strain. And so are the institutions that have been helped maintain that rules-based international order for over 7 decades now. The global strategic environment has rapidly changed, indeed deteriorated in many respects, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region where we live here in Australia. The changes we face are many, whether it's tensions over territorial claims, there is rapid military modernisation, foreign interference, cyber threats, disinformation, and indeed economic coercion. Meeting these challenges requires cooperation and a common purpose amongst like-minded nations and all who share that purpose of peace, stability and security, to enhance these as the outcomes that benefit all peoples from wherever they come and whatever their perspectives. Australia's interests are inextricably linked to an open, inclusive and resilient Indo-Pacific, a region where the rights of all states, no matter how large or how small, are protected. This is what we believe. Australia continues to work constructively on this goal with agency and purpose and commitment, passionately building a network of partnerships and relationships that support these goals, contributing to, with our Pacific family through the Pacific Islands Forum, with our ASEAN friends, very much at the heart of our own Indo-Pacific vision, through the Quad, with a practical agenda for peace, contribution and security in our region, with our many bilateral strategic partners, comprehensive strategic partners, and with our long-standing friends and allies, the United States and the United Kingdom. Strengthened, of course, further last week with the announcement of our new enhanced trilateral security partnership, AUKUS, designed to further the cause of peace, stability and security in the Indo-Pacific region for the benefit of all who live within that region. It is essential that countries pursue these interests in ways that are mutually respectful and support stability and security, because we want to maintain an open, rules-based international system that supports peace, prosperity, human dignity and the aspirations of all sovereign nations. A global order where sovereign nations can flourish free from coercion because of collaborative and purposeful action that enables them to correspond and engage in a fellowship that is supported by a rules-based order, rules that have underpinned regional peace and prosperity, such as through the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea and the Treaty for the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, which we affirm as Australians and which we will always honour. We must reinforce a sustainable rules-based order while ensuring it is also adaptable to the great power realities of our time. The United Nations must continue to reinforce the international rules-based order and preserve the institutions that uphold that order and ensure they're effective as the mechanisms for dialogue and adjudication that buttress and hold together this all-important order. Australia also values the rules and institutions that foster international trade, which creates wealth and brings nations together and is vital to our recovery from the economic costs of this pandemic. Finally, Mr. President, Australia is determined to play our part in meeting the global challenge of climate change as the world makes the transition to a net zero global energy economy, a new energy economy. Australia has a proven track record when it comes to setting, achieving and exceeding our commitments to responsibly reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We exceeded our Kyoto commitments. Our emissions in the year to March 2021 were 21% below 2005 levels. That is a strong record of achievement, and it's been achieved by Australians right across our community, our businesses, individual households, small businesses, our institutions, our governments. In Australia, we already have the world's highest uptake of rooftop solar, and we're deploying renewable energy at nearly 8 times the global per capita average. We are well on the way to exceed our 2030 Paris commitment of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 26 to 28% below 2005 levels. We will meet it and we will beat it, and we'll beat it strongly. And we are committing to achieving net zero emissions. My government, the Australian government, will release our long-term emissions reduction strategy ahead of the UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow at COP26. We know the world is transitioning to a new energy economy. It's no longer about if, or even when for that matter, it's about how we achieve the reduction in global emissions, in our own emissions, in individual nations' emissions, while still lifting living standards across all nations. And the answer, as history has shown us time and time again, it's technology, practical, scalable and commercially viable technologies. That's why we're investing around $20 billion to commercialise promising new technologies like clean hydrogen, green steel, long-duration energy storage and carbon capture, vital to meeting the global task to achieve net zero emissions. And we want to work with everyone, other countries, to commercialise these technologies and ensure they're scalable and accessible as soon as possible. This is critical for the good of developing countries, who we all know face the steepest challenge in reducing their emissions. Developing countries need job-creating investment in the same productive commercial technologies, energy technologies available to advanced economies like Australia. Australia is a reliable partner during this time of transition. We know that if we can support developing economies to embrace and use the technologies that achieve net zero emissions and see their economies grow and increase their jobs, that is not only wonderful for those economies and their peoples, but it also is good for Australia. We know that their success will also be our success. And so we are blessed here in this country with natural resources, including transition fuels and the resources needed for the new energy economy, and we will apply them. We will apply them in our region as we continue to work with our Southeast Asian partners and to assist them make their energy transitions successfully through finance, through trade and capability building. We have one global atmosphere, and it's in our shared interests to work with each other in this way. That's why we're helping other countries reduce their emissions and build resilience to climate change too. That's why we've set aside $1.5 billion in practical climate finance globally. And it will have a particular focus on our Pacific family, dealing directly. We're up for this global challenge. We're up for achieving net zero emissions, a challenge that we know will be met in partnership, and that unless we all get there, well, we will not achieve our goal. Mr. President, Australia has always sought to make a positive contribution to meeting global challenges. Our voice is clear, it's direct, it's respectful, it's constructive. It reflects our confidence in who we are and what we stand for. We are a proud liberal democracy. We believe in a world order that favours freedom, an order that was established through the fine institution of the United Nations that we gather around through these contributions, and that supports the dignity and free expression of all people. We believe in human rights, in gender equality and the rule of law, and we back that up with how we pursue these things in our own country, in our own society, and how we raise our own children. Australia was one of 8 countries only involved in the drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and we continue to strengthen the international human rights system. And we will continue to raise our voice on important issues like the rights of women and girls, the rights of Indigenous peoples, the global abolition of the death penalty, because respecting the rights and freedoms of the individual is intrinsically important. It is fundamental to our values as a people and as a nation. It lifts all societies and nations too, delivering better outcomes through economic inclusion, women's empowerment, environmental sustainability, rising living standards and so much more. Australians' actions are guided by our belief in the inherent dignity of all people, everywhere, no matter the circumstances. Mr. President, we learned through the pandemic that every moment of challenge requires us to think anew, to engage with each other, to learn as you go. It is an experience understood by many others, and so we will continue to meet this moment with dialogue, with partnership. Thank you, Mr. President.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Australia for the statement just made. The Assembly will hear an address by His Highness Sheikh Sabah Khalid Al-Hamad Al-Sabah, Prime Minister of the State of Kuwait. May I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming His Highness Sheikh Sabah Khalid Al-Hamad Al-Sabah, Prime Minister of the State of Kuwait, and I invite him to address the General Assembly.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. معالي السيد عبد الله شاهد رئيس الجمعية العامة للأمم المتحدة، معالي السيد أنطونيو غوتيريش الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة، أصحاب السمو والفخامة والمعالي رؤساء الوفود، السيدات والسادة الحضور، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يطيب لي بداية أن أتقدم بالتهنئة لشخصكم الكريم ولجمهورية المالديف الصديقة لانتخابكم رئيساً للدورة 76 للجمعية العامة، مؤكداً لكم دعمنا الكامل لكل ما من شأنه تسهيل مهام أعمالكم. وأود كذلك في هذه المناسبة أن أعرب عن خالص الامتنان المقدرة التي بذلها سلفكم سعادة فولكان بوسكير أبان توليه مهام رئاسة الدورة السابقة. ولا يفوتني في هذا المقام تقديم التهنئة لمعالي السيد أنطونيو غوتيريش لإعادة انتخابه أميناً عاماً للأمم المتحدة. أتى اعترافاً بجهوده المشهودة في قيادة هذه المنظمة خلال فترة ولايته الأولى، والتي شهدت سنتها الأخيرة تحدياً تشعب في أبعاده وتعمق في حجم أخطاره واستفحل بغلو في إلحاق الخسائر بالأرواح والأرباح، معنوية كانت أو مادية. سيد الرئيس، ما زال عالمنا يصطبغ بألوان قدها جائحة كوفيد-19. هذا الوباء ذي الطابع العالمي الذي اتصف بالقدرة التدميرية في إحداث الضرر وانتفاء الانتقائية في حصد أرواح البشر، وفارضاً لموجات متكررة من الهيمنة الطارئة التي أحدثت اهتزازات متوالية مست بالصميم أنماط الحياة الحديثة بمختلف مناحيها الإنسانية والسياسية والاقتصادية والبيئية. فبمرور عابر على الأرقام والإحصائيات الدولية المسجلة سنلحظ حجم الندوب التي ستبقى حاضرة ولمدة طويلة في وجدان الضمير العالمي. فمن أعداد الضحايا والذي تجاوز أكثر من 4.7 مليون نسمة، ومن الإصابات المسجلة لأكثر من 231 مليون حالة مؤكدة، وما حملته من أعباء لا تطاق للقطاعات الصحية والعاملين فيها، والذين يستحقون منا وقفة إجلال وتقدير على صمودهم في خط الدفاع الأول رغم الأهوال التي هددت بانهيار العديد من المنظومات الصحية حول العالم، إضافة إلى تفاقم أزمة انعدام الأمن الغذائي بسبب تعثر خطوط الإمدادات، والذي أتى كنتيجة متوقعة للانكماش والركود الاقتصادي الحاد الذي لم يواجهه العالم منذ أكثر من 90 عاماً، وتدني الخدمات التي تقدمها القطاعات التعليمية وبشكل خاص في الدول النامية والأقل نمواً، وبصورة باتت تهدد أكثر من أي تراجع المكاسب المحققة وبشطب الإنجازات المسجلة لأهداف التنمية المستدامة. سيد الرئيس، إن المتتبع لوقائع التاريخ سيجد أن الأوبئة رغم جسامة آثارها لعبت أدواراً مفصلية باعتبارها محفزاً رئيسياً للتغيير وإعادة البناء نحو الأفضل على المستوى السياسي والاقتصادي والاجتماعي. ومن هذا كانت جائحة كوفيد-19 بمثابة مرآة للعالم عكست خلالها أوجه ضعف وأظهرت مواطن الخلل، والتي تجلت في مظاهر مزمنة عدة، منها ارتفاع معدلات الجوع والفقر، طول أمد النزاعات، التطور غير المنضبط للتكنولوجيا الحديثة وتداعياته على الأمن السيبراني، تفشي آفة الإرهاب، استفحال ظاهرة التباين والتفاوت البنيوي والهيكلي بين الدول والذي أسهم في اتساع الفجوات بينها. كل هذه التحديات وأكثر وضعت العمل الدولي المتعدد الأطراف أمام محك يتسم بالمصيرية بين قابلية الاستمرار أو الجمود والانحسار. ولعل من أهم الانعكاسات الإيجابية للتغيير والتي عمدت الجائحة على أبرازها تمثلت في ظهور أنماط حديثة من الإبداع والابتكار والتكيف ساهمت في خلق استجابات سريعة وأشكالاً متقدمة للتعاون داخل المجتمعات ذاتها أو فيما بين الدول، إضافة للطفرة العلمية البحثية التي تجسدت في السباق توافق التقنية عمليات اتخاذ قرار الهادفة إلى الحصول على اللقاحات للوصول إلى مستويات التحصين الشاملة. وفي هذا السياق فقد حققت دولة الكويت إحدى أعلى النسب العالمية المسجلة في توفير اللقاحات، وذلك بنسبة وصلت إلى 72% للمواطنين والمقيمين على حد السواء، وكذلك القدرة في الحفاظ على منظومتها الصحية من التداعي. وتواصل بلادي تدعيم الجهود الدولية لمكافحة وباء كوفيد-19 حيث بلغ إجمالي مساهماتها 27 مليون و400 ألف دولار، كان آخرها تقديم مبلغ 40 مليون دولار لتحالف جافي ومبادرة منشأة كوفاكس، وذلك سعيا منها لتعزيز الأمن الصحي العالمي وتحصينه. ما زالت القضية الفلسطينية تشغل المكانة المركزية والمحورية في عالمينا العربي والإسلامي، وسيظل التوتر وعدم الاستقرار سائدا في منطقتنا ما لم ينل الشعب الفلسطيني كافة حقوقه السياسية المشروعة، وتتوقف إسرائيل سلطة الاحتلال عن ممارساتها وانتهاكاتها للقانون الإنساني الدولي المتمثلة وإغلاق المناطق واستمرار فرض الحصار على غزة وتدنيسها لحرمة الأماكن المقدسة، مؤكدين على أهمية مواصلة بذل الجهود من أجل إعادة المفاوضات ضمن جدول زمني محدد للوصول إلى السلام العادل والشامل وفق مرجعيات العملية السلمية وقرارات الشرعية الدولية ومبادرة السلام العربية لإنهاء الاحتلال الإسرائيلي وقيام الدولة الفلسطينية المستقلة وعاصمتها القدس الشرقية على حدود ما قبل 4 يونيو 1967 وعودة اللاجئين مشيدين في ذات الوقت بالأدوار التاريخية لوكالة الأونروا عبر تقديمها المساعدات الأساسية لملايين اللاجئين الفلسطينيين، مؤكدين على أهمية استمرار تقديم الدعم لأعمالها. السيد الرئيس، إن استمرار الأزمة السورية والتي دخلت سنتها 11 بكل ما تحمله من آلام إنسانية للمواطن السوري في الداخل والخارج ظل شاهداً على أن غياب الإجماع والإرادة الدولية من جهة والتدخلات الخارجية من جهة أخرى كان السبب الرئيسي في إطالة أمد هذا النزاع الدامي. ومن هنا نجدد قناعتنا الثابتة بعدم وجود حل عسكري لها، وكذلك على أهمية العمل للتوصل إلى تسوية سياسية وفقا لقرارات مجلس الأمن ذات الصلة، لا سيما القرار 2254، وبما يحقق ويلبي تطلعات وطموحات الشعب السوري الشقيق. سيد الرئيس، ارتبط استمرار الأزمة في اليمن الشقيق وما تحمله من تهديدات متزايدة وخطيرة للأمن والاستقرار الإقليمي بالواقع المرصود حول كيفية التعاطي مع قرارات ومخرجات مجلس الأمن ذات الصلة. ومن هنا نجدد موقفنا الراسخ بأن الحل الوحيد لهذه الأزمة هو الحل السياسي المبني على المرجعيات الثلاث المتفق عليها، وهي المبادرة الخليجية وآليتها التنفيذية، مخرجات مؤتمر الحوار الوطني، قرارات مجلس الأمن لا سيما القرار 2200، مجددين دعمنا للمبعوث الخاص للأمين العام إلى اليمن، مرحبين بذات الوقت بالأدوار البناءة التي قامت بها المملكة العربية السعودية الشقيقة من أجل تفعيل تنفيذ اتفاق الرياض، وكذلك على مبادرتها للسلام في اليمن، مجددين بالوقت ذاته إدانتنا لكافة الاعتداءات والهجمات التي تعرضت لها الأراضي السعودية، ومؤكدين دعمنا لكافة الإجراءات والتدابير التي تتخذها المملكة للحفاظ على أمنها واستقرارها. السيد الرئيس، شكل توصل ملتقى الحوار السياسي الليبي مطلع العام إلى انتخاب رئيس المجلس الرئاسي ونوابه وكذلك رئيس مجلس الوزراء، علامة مضيئة حول قدرة المجتمع الدولي ممثلا بالأمم المتحدة على إحداث نقلة نوعية على طريق السلام الوعر، والذي زاد من منزلقاته شيوع حالة الانقسام المؤسسي الحاد منذ أكثر من 7 سنوات، والتي تفاقمت مؤشراتها الخطيرة على أمن واستقرار البلاد ودول المنطقة، مجددين دعوتنا للأشقاء الليبيين بضرورة تغليب المصالح العليا للبلاد وكذلك الحلول السلمية القائمة النابذة للعنف، وبضرورة الالتزام بمخرجات المؤتمرات الدولية وقرارات مجلس الأمن ذات الصلة بما يضمن الانتهاء من كافة الترتيبات المطلوبة لعقد الانتخابات العامة في موعدها المقرر في 24 ديسمبر 2021، معربين عن تطلعنا أن تؤدي تلك الجهود إلى التوصل إلى تدابير ضامنة لأمن واستقرار ووحدة ليبيا وتلبي تطلعات شعبها الشقيق. سيد الرئيس، لعبت التداعيات السياسية والاجتماعية والاقتصادية جراء تفشي الجائحة في شيوع حالة من الانكفاء العالمي، وبصورة عمدت الجماعات الإرهابية والمتطرفة على استغلالها في المناطق المنكوبة بالصراعات أو تلك التي تعاني من الهشاشة الأمنية، حيث أن ما عانته منطقة الشرق الأوسط بشكل خاص من تنامي العمليات التخريبية للتنظيمات الإرهابية وعلى رأسها تنظيم داعش الإرهابي كان سببا رئيسيا لتكثيف الجهود لمحاربة هذا الخطر الحقيقي بجميع أشكاله وصوره، والعمل على تجفيف منابعه والقضاء على مصادر تمويله، والعمل على تفعيل الاتفاقيات الدولية والإقليمية المعنية بمكافحة الإرهاب. وفي ظل ما تشهده عدة دول في منطقتنا من تنامي هذا الخطر المدمر في كل من اليمن، ليبيا، سوريا، الصومال، العراق، فلقد راقب المجتمع الدولي وباهتمام بالغ التطورات الدقيقة التي شهدتها أفغانستان مؤخرا. وفي هذا الصدد ندعو حركة طالبان وكافة الأطراف إلى ضرورة ممارسة أقصى درجات ضبط النفس حقنا للدماء وتوفير الحماية الكاملة للمدنيين والتقيد بالالتزامات والقوانين الدولية والحفاظ على أمن واستقرار البلاد وحقوق ومكتسبات الشعب الأفغاني الصديق. وعلى ذات الصعيد الإقليمي ومن المنطلقات المبدئية المتصلة بترسيخ قواعد حسن الجوار والواردة في ميثاق الأمم المتحدة، فإننا نجدد الدعوة للجمهورية الإسلامية الإيرانية إلى اتخاذ تدابير جادة لبناء الثقة للبدء في حوار مبني على احترام سيادة الدول وعدم التدخل في شؤونها الداخلية وتخفيف حدة التوتر في الخليج والحفاظ على سلامة وأمن وحرية الملاحة البحرية من أي تهديدات، وبما يساهم في إرساء علاقات قائمة على التعاون والاحترام المتبادل، وبما يعكس التطلعات المستقبلية لجميع دول المنطقة في حياة يسودها الأمن والاستقرار، وبما يحقق الرخاء والتنمية لشعوبها. ومن القضايا الشائكة ذات الطابع الإقليمي فلقد شكل تآكل نظام نزع السلاح النووي تحدياً ذو طابع وجودي لأمن واستقرار المنطقة، ونتطلع في هذا الصدد إلى تضافر الجهود الدولية والإقليمية لإنجاح مقاصد المؤتمر المعني بإنشاء المنطقة الخالية من الأسلحة النووية وأسلحة الدمار الشامل الأخرى في منطقة الشرق الأوسط، والذي ستترأس دولة الكويت دورته الثانية والمقرر عقدها في شهر نوفمبر القادم في مقر الأمم المتحدة بنيويورك. السيد الرئيس، عند استمرار جائحة كورونا وإمعانها في سلب المنجزات التي حققتها الدول للوصول إلى أهداف التنمية المستدامة، قد أظهرت مدى التشابك والترابط بين الأبعاد المختلفة للاستدامة، بحيث لم تكن قضية تغير المناخ والنظم الإيكولوجية المرتبطة بها بمنأى عن موجات التأثر العالمية. وفي هذا الصدد نتطلع في أن تفضي نتائج مؤتمر الأمم المتحدة للتغير المناخي والمقرر عقده في مدينة جلاسكو في شهر نوفمبر القادم في إيجاد مراجعة بناءة تكفي القياس التقدم المحرز وإيضاح أوجه القصور استنادا لمبدأ المسؤولية المشتركة والأخذ بعين الاعتبار تباين المسؤوليات والأعباء، وبما يحقق المساهمة في وقف التدهور البيئي والذي زاد من حدته الارتفاع الملحوظ بدرجات الحرارة وزيادة شدة العواصف والفيضانات وتقلص المسطحات الخضراء جراء تكرار ظاهرة حرائق الغابات في عدد من دول العالم، والتي سيكون لها تداعيات بيئية وخيمة. وفي الختام لا يسعني إلا أن أجدد تمسكنا بالنظام الدولي المتعدد الأطراف وبمبادئ وأهداف ميثاق الأمم المتحدة، وبما يكفل تطوير وتعزيز الحوكمة الدولية لضمان تحقيق رسالتها السامية في حفظ السلم والأمن الدوليين وخدمة البشرية جمعاء. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of the State of Kuwait for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by Her Excellency Ana Brnabić, Prime Minister of the Republic of Serbia. May I request protocol to escort Her Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming Her Excellency Ana Brnabić, Prime Minister of the Republic of Serbia. I invite her to address the General Assembly.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I have the great honor to address you today on behalf of the citizens of the Republic of Serbia. Esteemed Excellencies, Mr. Abdullah Shahid, Mr. Volkan Bozkır, and Mr. Antonio Guterres. I would like to thank you for the active engagement, dedication, and leadership you have shown for the United Nations and all of humanity during these difficult times. Serbia shares your conviction, and we remain fully committed to supporting your efforts. This year, we come together at a decisive moment in our history. COVID-19 has shaken our foundations to the core. At the same time, we are increasingly witnessing and experiencing the effects of climate change. And finally, we are seeing significant shifts in global partnerships and alliances, trade wars between traditional partners and allies, protectionism instead of openness and free market policies, and overall uncertainty at an unprecedented scale. Some of the pressing and extremely emotional issues that we have locally in the Balkans are still unresolved, and while we are trying, and Serbia is especially dedicated to this, to change the future by working together and creating alliances through initiatives such as the Berlin Process and Open Balkans Initiative, others are trying to disrupt these processes, and instead of focusing on the future, they want to recreate the past, whatever the cost of that may be. But let me start with COVID. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed critical weaknesses in the architecture of global governance. It has threatened to erase the progress many nations have achieved in recent years. It has placed nations at the junction between isolation and collaboration, between panic and hope, between chaos and order. The pandemic questioned some of the basic tenets of the open and cooperative international order. Global exchanges, international communication, and cross-border trade have all seen a vast decrease. Curfews, restrictions on freedom, and lockdowns of entire societies have created uncertainty in many segments of the individual lives of our citizens, and for that matter, our own individual perception of what freedom in today's world even means. For Serbia, this pandemic threatened to undermine everything we have been doing for the past 7 years, to crush all of the results and accomplishments of difficult reforms we initiated in 2014, and to propel us back to the times of high unemployment, rising public debt, uncontrollable deficit, and overall desperation. Much as in any other country, COVID-19 has tested our nation's resiliency. And this time, unlike during the global financial crisis, which was still much more limited in scope and incomparable in consequences to the COVID-19 pandemic, this time Serbia stood strong. The reforms we undertook in the pre-COVID times made us more resilient than ever. The fiscal consolidation, the budget surplus we had, efficient and predictable investment environment became a lifeline that saved us from a recession during the pandemic, and one that ensured we could support our citizens and our economy during these most difficult of times. Despite the effects of the crisis, Serbia has managed to preserve financial and economic stability. In 2020, we recorded a decline in GDP of only 0.9%, one of the best results in Europe. Our public debt remained below 60% of our GDP. Average salary continued to grow by almost 10%, while despite the pandemic, the number of people employed increased by over 3%. The recovery this year has been stronger than we expected. Our GDP will grow approximately 7%, and perhaps by even more. Prior to the pandemic, we have opened our borders to investment, technology, and ideas, and we managed to create a peaceful and stable environment that allowed us to pursue rapid domestic transformation with innovation and knowledge-based economy as the foundation. The innovative advances we have made allowed us to diversify our capabilities when the virus hit, through e-government, online education, digital textbooks, and a central software system which drove a successful vaccination rollout. We invested heavily in healthcare infrastructure and strengthened the health system in order to respond to the current crisis, and are eternally grateful to our healthcare workers for their dedicated struggle. Our decision to put geopolitics aside and people at the center of our policies is the reason we were able to acquire vaccines quicker than most other nations. We did not discriminate between manufacturers, did not care whether vaccines are from the East or West, but chose to negotiate with all vaccine manufacturers deemed safe by regulators. This openness gave us the ability to purchase vaccines from around the world, giving our citizens the unique freedom to choose which vaccine they prefer. Excellencies, believes in solidarity between nations, multilateralism, and helping others when in need. Since the beginning of this year, we have made it our mission to support our neighbors and all those in need with COVID-19 vaccines. We have also allowed foreign nationals to come to Serbia to receive the vaccine which will protect their lives. In total, Serbia has donated or allocated over 1 million doses of vaccines, 230,000 doses for the region, 300,000 doses for foreign nationals who came to Serbia to get vaccines, and an additional 570,000 doses for countries of Africa and Asia. And we will keep doing so to the greatest extent possible until COVID-19 is behind all of us. This is why we have also taken steps to acquire the technology to produce at least 2 types of vaccines to help improve global access so we can all be safe and triumph over this virus. However, as stated by dignitaries of some of the largest nations during this General Assembly, there are other pressing issues that all of us need to keep addressing without any delay and in a bold manner. And the most urgent is climate change. Serbia has redoubled its efforts to make our country safer and cleaner for its citizens, and by doing so, contribute to the fight against climate change and for environmental protection. We are strongly committed to the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement on climate change. We are committed to global efforts to continue to work actively to meet our obligation under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. We are about to submit our revised nationally determined contributions to contribute to this critical global effort. We have already announced our intention to reduce greenhouse gases by at least 33.3% compared to 1990 and 13%, which we are currently incorporating into our energy and climate strategic documents. We work strategically on planning and investments in this sector. These investments are extremely expensive, requiring years and decades of commitment and a systematic approach. But we are firmly set on the path of this transformation. Ladies and gentlemen, of all the challenges we face, Horizon for Serbia is the maintenance of peace and stability in the southern Serbia province of Kosovo and Metohija. For more than 2 decades, we have been constantly drawing international attention to the problems that the non-Albanian population is facing in Kosovo and Metohija. Physical safety and respect for and protection of human rights, and especially of minority communities, are far from satisfactory. We are now witnessing a constant increase in the number of attacks on Serbs, their property, and religious heritage in Kosovo and Metohija. To illustrate, there were 55 such incidents in 2014, 62 in 2016, 71 in 2020, and 100 since the beginning of this year. The total number of attacks in 2020 was already surpassed by June of this year. According to the United Nations, Kosovo and Metohija is still the territory with the least number of returnees, internally displaced Serbs, areas in the entire world. I will give you just a few examples to depict what the lives of Serbs in Kosovo and Metohija look like today. On the 11th of May, the house of Radoje Pulović, 81-year-old returnee to Kosovo in the village of Dubrava in the Istok municipality. This was the 5th attack on him in the same year. And again, I emphasize, he's 81 years old. Since June 2021, multiple attacks were carried out against Dragica Gašić, a 59-year-old woman. The first Serb returnee to Đakovica, 22 years after the end of the conflict. Attacks include stoning of her apartment, her from shopping for food in the local store, and petitions by civil demanding her eviction from the city. On the 2nd of July, in the village of Gojbulja, near Vučitrn, a group of Albanians attacked 13-year-old Nikola Perić. The attack occurred when he was returning home from the school playground with 3 friends. Attacks on Serbian medieval churches, monasteries, and monuments in Kosovo and Metohija make them some of the most endangered cultural heritage sites in Europe. The monastery Visoki Dečani, recently listed by Europa Nostra as one of the 7 most endangered heritage sites in Europe in 2021. The advisory panel noted that Dečani is the only monument in Europe under robust military protection for a continuous period of 20 years, although it constitutes a monument of ultimate historical and cultural importance for Europe and the world. This spiral of violence occurring in Kosovo and Metohija culminated at the beginning of this week. On the pretext of enforcing new license plate rules, Pristina dispatched heavily armed special units to the north of province. This is yet another brutal violation of the Brussels Agreement. This irrational show of force has ignited a major crisis. The supply of food and medication to Serb communities in the north of the province. Local Serbs who peacefully gathered to protest this measure were met with tear gas and police brutality, thus seriously threatening local and regional stability. But despite all of the challenges and daily provocations, Serbia remains strongly committed to finding a compromise-based solution that will ensure lasting peace and stability. Dialogue and the implementation of the agreements reached are the only to resolve all open issues. However, almost 9 years after reaching the Brussels Agreement on normalization between Belgrade and Pristina, the establishment of the Community of Serb Municipalities, the very backbone of this agreement, has not yet even begun. And I would like to appeal once again to the international community and especially to the European Union as the guarantor of the Brussels Agreement to firmly insist that the provisional institutions of self-government in Pristina start implementing all of the agreements reached. The Republic of Serbia, by defending its sovereignty and territorial integrity, at the same time defends international law, the UN Charter, the legal Security Council Resolution 1244, and the supreme authority of the Security Council when it comes to the preservation of international peace and stability. We attach special importance to the activity of the UN mission in Kosovo and Metohija and expect it to continue to implement its mandate in the province in accordance with this resolution. Dear friends, our generation shares the common destiny of the modern world, which is becoming increasingly complex in politics, technology, health, and climate. In the face of these challenges, Serbia will continue nurturing international partnerships on a predictable and transparent basis. We will continue pursuing rule of law reforms on our EU path, which is our strategic foreign policy goal. We see this as inseparable from achieving sustainable peace, stability, and prosperity. We will host, together with the Republic of Azerbaijan, as the current chair of the non-aligned movement, a commemorative high-level event marking the 60th anniversary of the non-aligned movement conference, which was held in Belgrade in 1961. And we are very much looking forward to hosting our friends from all parts of the world in Belgrade across the Balkans through the Open Balkans Berlin process by opening borders, harmonizing differences, and further. And in conclusion, over the past 7 years, Serbia has been transformed. We sparked an economic revival, created opportunities for young people, cultivated a tech boom, and improved Serbia's position abroad. The progress we have made has allowed Serbia to and survive the pandemic. The world now faces a turning point. The recovery from COVID-19 and sustainable reconstruction will not proceed if issues, new and old, are not handled by joint forces and collaborative international actions. This pandemic taught us one: unless all of us are safe, no one is safe. All of us, regardless of how rich or poor, large or small, from Europe, Asia, Africa, America, or Australia, or fail together. If anything, the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the issue of climate change, should have taught us to stand together. Thank you very much.
Au nom de l'Assemblée générale, je remercie la Première ministre de la République de Serbie de l'allocution qu'elle vient de prononcer et je prie le protocole de bien vouloir accompagner son Excellence. Je donne maintenant la parole au représentant du Danemark pour qu'il introduise l'allocution de la chef de gouvernement.
Mr. President, I have the honor and privilege of introducing a pre-recorded statement by Her Excellency, Mrs. Mette Frederiksen, Prime Minister of Denmark.
Mr. President, dear delegates, no one can be in doubt. In a connected world, we face global challenges. They can only be solved together. COVID-19, human rights violations, climate change, poverty. As a founding member of the UN, Denmark is a strong voice. And today, throughout history, international solidarity has moved us forward. It has the power to do so again. Out of the pandemic, we must ensure global access. None of us can leave COVID behind until all of us can. Denmark is committed to vaccine solidarity and COVAX. In the spring, we announced the donation of 3 million. This week, we announce a redoubling of our efforts. We now aim to donate more than 6 million doses. That is more than one donated vaccine for each Dane. It comes in addition to COVAX with more than $15 million. If we are to strengthen our ability to prevent and respond to future pandemics. International solidarity also has the power to prevent a climate disaster. The latest IPCC report makes it clear that we are standing at a global crossroad. We must continue our path towards a green future, and we have to do it faster. We need to keep the Paris Agreement goal alive, limiting the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. Climate change hits the world's poorest and weakest communities hardest. Denmark will respond to the call of the Secretary General and massively scale up Danish grant-based climate finance to at least $5 a year by 2023. And we are dedicating 60% to adaptation in poor and vulnerable countries. In addition, we are strengthening our efforts to mobilize public and private finance from other sources. In total, Denmark aims to contribute at least 1% of the collective target of $100 billion. At the same time, we are fully focused on reducing our own emissions. Denmark will be climate neutral no later than 2050. And by 2030, we have committed to cut our greenhouse gas emissions by 70%. We have decided to end production of oil and gas and build Energy Island. In time, they will create clean energy for millions of European households. We call on you all to follow and to do so urgently. Every one of us needs to act and adapt, but we also have to act for the common good. That is the case in Afghanistan as well. The current situation is disturbing for the long-suffering people of Afghanistan, for the women and children, and also for the international society. We need a strong and coordinated response. The contribution at the International Donor Conference last week was an important step. I would like to express my appreciation for the commitment of our international humanitarian partners. They are providing life-saving assistance in Afghanistan and in the many other places. Thank you. Peace missions are keeping peace, preventing conflicts, and paving the way for progress every day around the world. No people in conflict zones should be forgotten. We must include those that have been excluded and empower those that have been powerless. Women and young people have a vital role to play in peace building and in conflict prevention. Denmark remains committed to the agenda for women, peace, and security. International solidarity has the power to give us hope. Hope for a better future in the places we call home, and hope for protection whenever we need it. But for many around the world, this hope comes at a high price. We are today leaving the destiny of too many people to human smugglers. The current asylum and migration system does not address the challenges we face today. We need to do it to save lives and to prevent rape and abuse. It calls for new common sense. My government is devoted to addressing the root causes. We have dedicated a large amount of funding to regions of conflict to help create conditions for a better future where people actually live and to help more people. We need to work together to ensure safe and orderly migration and to protect those in need. Denmark is committed to a strong and efficient UN that protects the rule-based international order, promotes a more progressive world, and fight injustice. Last year, we asked the Secretary General to report back to us, the member states, with recommendations to advance our common agenda. He has done so. Now we have to act on these recommendations, all of us. The social contract between governments and people should be renewed in our own societies and at the global level. As host of the Social Summit in 1995, Denmark feels a special responsibility so that we may gather again in 2025 and continue the work towards the SDGs. 30 years on from Copenhagen and on the road to 2030. Thank you.
Au nom de l'Assemblée générale, je tiens à remercier la Première ministre du Danemark pour la locution qu'elle vient de prononcer. Et je donne maintenant la parole, Excellences, mes chers collègues, à la représentante de la Jamaïque pour qu'elle introduise la locution de la chef de gouvernement.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, it is my great pleasure and distinct honor to introduce to you Prime Minister of Jamaica, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, who will deliver a pre-recorded statement. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Mr. Abdullah Shahid, I extend warm congratulations on your election to the presidency of this 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly. I also commend your predecessor, Mr. Volkan Bozkır, for his work during the historic 75th anniversary, a particularly difficult year for the United States grappled with the insidious COVID-19 pandemic. Your Excellency, you can be confident of Jamaica's continued commitment to collaborate and seek viable solutions for persistent global challenges, most notably the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. We must take a fresh look at how we rebuild and renew our focus on social justice and climate action. Mr. President, the theme for this year's debate, with its emphasis on building resilience, is welcomed as the world searches for ways to manage the COVID-19 pandemic with its dreadful impacts on all aspects of human existence. We must inspire hope to emergence from the scourge of this pandemic better and stronger than we were before. Mr. President, at the core of building resilience is restoring the health and well-being of our people. The pandemic has exacerbated challenges in this area, especially for states like Jamaica, which already face limited resources in our health sector. Most regrettably, many lives have been lost, and we extend our condolences. There are increasing uncertainties as the pandemic continues and new variants emerge, while mitigation efforts to help to reduce and mortality remain crucial. The long-term solution to all. We know that vaccines only work if a critical threshold is attained. Sharing vaccines in a strategic manner serves the global common good, as no country will be safe until all are safe. Jamaica supports a globally coordinated approach to the scaling up of production and equitable distribution of vaccines with the United Nations. We welcome the support received from bilateral and international partners, and through was conceived, bringing widespread inspiration of hope in the collective approach. Has not met all expectations. Nevertheless, we believe in the essential merits of the facility and call for urgent, increased international collaboration to avoid a widening gap in recovery across countries and regions. Mr. President, today we see digital dividend, while others suffer the consequences of a digital divide. Need to urgently address this digital divide in COVID-19 adaptation measures, responses, and recovery efforts. Accelerated digitalization, remote work and education, e-commerce, and the virtual delivery of essential services have allowed the digitally connected to thrive while exacerbating the inequalities faced by the digitally disconnected. In our rural areas, along gender lines, and generally among the poorest and most vulnerable. Addressing these negative consequences of the digital divide will require greater engagement of the public and private sectors in building foundations for long-term development. Leaving no one behind today means leaving no one offline. That is why Jamaica has been working to ensure that the tools needed to adapt and thrive are provided to our citizens. Mr. President, the COVID-19 pandemic has also spurred innovation and new forms of collaboration across sectors. We are committed to the development of a sustainable framework to ensure the availability of human capital to meet the growing, changing needs of the economy. Jamaica is taking an inclusive approach to improve digital literacy through increased access to and use of ICT by 50% in public institutions, schools, and key public areas in the country over the next 4 years. We are engaging the application of science, technology, and innovation in educational institutions towards national development. We believe that countries should be supported in their efforts to build robust and resilient digital infrastructure. Public investments of this sort can serve narrowing the gaps that result in inequitable development outcomes. Universal, secure, and affordable digital connectivity is needed to ensure inclusive and sustainable development. Therefore, advocate for an increased digital alliance within the global community and support the UN Secretary General's high-level panel on the Digital Cooperation Roadmap. Mr. President, the multiple associated with the COVID-19 pandemic have placed severe pressure on our fiscal accounts, threatening our hard-won macroeconomic stability. The pandemic has demonstrated how quickly our development gains can be eroded, and that much more needs to be done by the international community to secure a resilient future for the most vulnerable. We must retain hope in the targets for the SDGs, even with adjusted time. Mr. President, last year, along with Canada and the UN Secretary General and other heads of state and government and key international partners, I convened the Financing for Development in the Era of COVID-19, and the outcome was ambitious, yet practical, with policy options to support COVID-19 response and recovery for consideration. But it now remains for us to take action. For Jamaica, we anticipate real GDP recovery within 4 years, given the relative strength of our economy and the stimulus packages implemented both locally and internationally. However, we will require space and to be able to and economic implications of the pandemic in light of high debt servicing requirements. The continued use of measures of development which do not take into account the full spectrum of vulnerabilities of small island developing states is a major impediment to our efforts to attain SDGs. We who live in one of the most disaster-prone regions of the world are more vulnerable than our income data suggests. We reiterate today that consideration of our socio-economic and environmental vulnerability. This rationale underpins the basis for a multidimensional vulnerability in developing states and for the ongoing work by the UN on this matter, as endorsed by the United Nations General last year. Mr. President, the Caribbean Development Bank has reported that small island developing states' debts have risen to unsustainable levels since the pandemic. The number of Caribbean countries with a debt to GDP ratio above 60% has increased from 9 to 13, with the average ratio increasing to 85%. Jamaica maintains the valuation criteria as the classification system utilized by international financial institutions is simply not appropriate. We concur with the UN Secretary General in his assessment that graduation must be a reward, not a punishment. As we strive to build forward stronger in this decade of action, we call for the commitment of the international community to a post-COVID reality that guarantees greater investment and financing to support development in small island developing states. We also seek the reorientation of the international financial system to align financing with sustainable development to accelerate our push to achieve our SDG goals. Mr. President, climate change remains one of the defining global challenges of our era and of even greater concern for our ability to achieve sustainable development will be compromised if we do not find real solutions to the ongoing climate emergency. The demand for climate adaptation is increasing, but so is the fear that it will be is the IPCC's finding that human influence on the Earth's climate has already led to unprecedented and irreversible changes. In their efforts to combat these changes, small island developing states have been unable to access climate finance at the pace and scale, instead been forced to spend significant funds on loss and damage, with limited financial support from large emitters. Jamaica joins with all small island developing states in calling for the delivery of the $100 billion per annum committed in 2015 by the international donor community. COP26 significant progress on the priority issues of climate financing, loss and damage, adaptation and mitigation, as well as the development of effective climate change plans. Mr. President, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea recognizes the ocean as a common heritage of mankind. As the science and the research have shown, we must also see the oceans as playing a vital role as a climate mitigator. We support the development of a legally binding international instrument on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction. We look forward to the successful conclusion of negotiations for an international convention in 2022. Mr. President, we reaffirm the importance of multilateral approaches to the issues of peace and development and the central role of the United Nations in their treatment. We support the resolution of disputes, whether in the Middle East, in the Caribbean, or elsewhere, through dialogue and negotiated settlements. We to the economic embargo imposed by the United States of America against Cuba. Mr. President, the illicit proliferation of small arms and light weapons remains a daily challenge to citizen security and a grave concern. The widespread availability of these arms and their ammunition is a key enabler of conflict and endemic crime and represent a significant danger to our internal security, fostering criminal activities which destabilize the social order. Work with all our partners to enhance the capacity of member states to address issues related to arms control and disarmament by preventing the diversion of conventional arms to the illicit market. This matter remains a priority for Jamaica as we seek the assistance of our bilateral, regional, and international partners in addressing this issue. President, the celebration of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations is the pivotal role of the organization, to which we continue to assign new mandates and challenges. Let us, with equal fervor, resolve to equip the organization with the necessary tools and financial resources to enable it to effectively undertake its leadership role in safeguarding international peace and security and in ensuring the economic and social well-being of mankind. Our common vision must be one in which the UN can act and will act. Hope for change, for peace, and as an instrument of progress on behalf of all peoples of the world. I thank you.
Au nom de l'Assemblée générale, je tiens à remercier le Premier ministre, ministre de la Jamaïque, pour l'allocution qu'il vient de prononcer. Nous allons maintenant, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, entendre l'allocution de Son Excellence John Briceño, le Premier ministre et ministre des Finances, du Développement économique et de l'Investissement du Belize. Je prie le protocole de bien vouloir accompagner Son Excellence. J'ai le grand plaisir de souhaiter la bienvenue à Son Excellence John Briceño, le Premier ministre et ministre des Finances, du Développement économique et de l'Investissement du Belize, et je l'invite à prendre la parole devant l'Assemblée générale.
Mr. President, congratulations on being elected President of the General Assembly. It is with great pleasure to see a representative of our fellow small island developing state presiding over the 76th section of the United Nations General Assembly. For a small island state and low-lying coastal state like Belize, years ago, celebrated 40 years of political independence, the world today is hostile and precarious. No one can deny that the planet is getting hotter. The facts are, March 1 was the hottest month ever. Each of the last 4 decades have been successively warmer than any decade that preceded it since 1850. Global temperature is now 1.2 degrees warmer. Sea levels are rising. The fact is that the global average sea level has risen faster since 1900 than over any preceding century in the last 3,000 years. Since 1900, droughts are unprecedented and have become more frequent and last longer. Severe weather events are more frequent and devastating. The last 20 years have seen the number of more than double, while the incidence of storms grew from 1,457 to 2,034. Mother Nature is rebelling. She is reacting to our destructive tendencies and our refusal to take urgent corrective action. We can do better. Now, Mr. President, our capacity to survive is being tested by the unrelenting COVID-19 pandemic.
COVID-19 brought the Belizean economy to its knees. Unemployment reached 30% as thousands of Belizeans lost their jobs. By 14%. Our debt ballooned to 130% of GDP. Many small businesses were shuttered. The poverty rate increased to 60%. The impact of the pandemic has been swift, dramatic, and devastating. The human toll has been deadly. Already 399 Belizeans lost their lives to COVID-19. We have a fatality rate of 2.05%. Thousands have been hospitalized so far. Our health facilities are overwhelmed as they were unprepared for the surge in admission. This is not unique to Belize. To confront the urgency of the pandemic, governments across the globe reallocated funds to meet desperate needs. Loans originally committed for development and climate change to cover emergency health needs and to mitigate the impact of the unemployed. Massive additional borrowings became the new normal as lockdowns were extended. Framework and debt service suspension initiative failed to offer forbearance to most middle-income SIDS, including Belize, who are ineligible despite our debt unsustainability. At the same time, no recourse to concessionary financing to fund the immediate health response. Señor Presidente, el compromiso de Belice conservación es ambiciosa. To roll our national vaccination. Global response was slow and inadequate to the scale and depth of the health crisis. Disruption of supply chains made access to the much-needed COVID-19 therapeutics, diagnosis, and PPEs beyond the reach of many developing countries. Vaccine hoarding has reduced access to COVID-19 vaccines for developing countries, undermining COVAX and leading to deep and threatening inequalities. 80% of vaccines administered worldwide have been in high and upper middle income countries. Only 0.4% of doses have been administered in low income countries. In Latin America and the Caribbean, the region worst hit by the pandemic, only about a fifth of the population has received vaccines. A pesar de las inequidades y morales, los países que tienen un grado más alto de vacunación están a punto de administrar inyecciones de refuerzo a su población que ya están vacunados. No solamente es injusto, simplemente es lamentable. Ciertamente, el mundo necesita urgentemente volver a comprometerse al multilateralismo. Belize exists today because of the multilateral system. The support of UN member states for Belize's territorial integrity and respect for our right to self-determination was critical to the achievement of Belize's independence. For us, the multilateral system is indispensable. For this reason, Belize supports the Secretary General's thoughtful and forward-looking Our Common Agenda, which sets out a concise plan of action to accelerate the implementation of our agreed goals, including Agenda 2030. Despite the inclination to retreat towards nationalist tendencies. The truth is that whether it is the health or climate crisis, the scale of the challenge, the magnitude of the impact, and the urgency of the action required cannot be met by any one country alone. Inequality and vulnerabilities are also a threat to the rich and strong. Therefore, our common future depends squarely on our solidarity, international cooperation, and a strong and effective multilateral system. We must commit to finding solutions together to the common problems that we confront. Unbridled unilateralism must yield to the settled determination to respond to the major problems of our times with social justice. My country is pursuing, along with Guatemala, the final and peaceful resolution of Guatemala's claim to Belizean territory at the International Court of Justice. In the meantime, the 2005 Agreement on Confidence-Building Measures remain in effect, and our bilateral relations continue to be based on mutual goodwill. We count on Guatemala to remain a constructive partner and rely on the international community to support us in addressing the daily challenges along the border that are inevitable between neighbors. If the multilateral system is to be our collective lifeline, it must be repurposed. I wish to propose 4 areas for the reform and strengthening of the multilateral system. We call for a genuine commitment to address the systemic issues which undermine the achievement of our agreed development goals. The continued ineligibility of SIDS from accessing concessional finance leaves us in a vicious cycle of disaster or crisis recovery, borrowing leading to unsustainable levels of debt. This must be disrupted. A multi-dimensional vulnerability index is the indispensable tool for restoring rationality to access affordable financing. We therefore welcome the work of the UN and other development partners, such as the Commonwealth and the Caribbean Development Bank, in developing an MVI that does not only consider economic development, but also the inherent vulnerabilities of SIDS, scale, geography, and limited natural resources. We need to adopt an MVI now. We call upon all the international financial institutions and our development partners to use it. There is no alternative if our countries are to embark on a sustainable and resilient economic development plan. If our multilateral system is to remain credible, it must have the capacity to induce action. For far too long, too many global problems have been allowed to fester and become crises. The entire world is now experiencing the consequences of our inaction: catastrophic droughts, fires, floods, and more frequent and intense hurricanes that continue to affect and set back our small, open, and dependent economies. The latest scientific assessment of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change lays the blame firmly on human activity. Belize, like other SIDS, is on the front line of a climate crisis for which we are not responsible. Belize incurs annual losses of close to 4% of GDP due to natural disasters. Therefore, we felt an obligation to put forward an ambitious, revised, nationally determined contribution. Belize's NDC covers new targets in both adaptation and mitigation. It is naturally aligned to both our national development plans and the SDGs. We have set some ambitious targets, including forest restoration and expansion of mangroves, as well as achieving 75% of electricity from renewable sources by 2030. The NDC also pledges to transition to a hybrid and electric public transportation system, increase resilience of coastal communities, and strengthen the adaptive capacity of agriculture, health, and tourism. Belize is committed to developing a long-term strategy aligned with achieving net zero global emissions by 2050. We are doing our part. We expect the developed countries and major emitters to do their part. Indeed, ambitious commitments from the G20 alone can keep us on the path to limiting global temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius. COP26 is our latest best hope to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial level. We call for a revamping of our collective ambition so that by 2030, global emissions are reduced by 50%. Developed countries and those in a position to do so must provide the financial, technical, and capacity building support to enable us to fulfill those pledges. This includes meeting and exceeding the $100 billion pledge made in Copenhagen 12 years ago. Additional support must be provided for the loss and damage being incurred through the extreme and slow onset climatic events we are already experiencing. Flexibility and responsiveness are critical if our multilateral system is to have relevance at moments of crisis, as well as to ensure equity and fairness in global responses. COVAX, the multilateral mechanism for vaccine distribution, has been unable to truly respond to the needs of its subscribers. The undermining of COVAX through export bans, vaccine hoarding, and predatory purchasing has resulted in extreme inequality of access to vaccines. Of the more than 5.7 billion vaccine doses that have been administered globally, 73% have been given in just 10 countries. COVAX has had to cut its forecast for distribution of vaccines by 25% for 2021. Belize has no delivery date for its next COVAX shipment. As the Director General of the WHO said, the longer vaccine inequality persists, the more the virus will keep circulating and changing. The longer the social and economic disruption will continue, and hinder the chances that more variants will emerge that render vaccines less effective. The health and recovery of all of us depend on the ability of our system to rapidly respond to the needs of all countries. The multilateral system must be more effective in protecting the rights of all people. Too many people remain marginalized and excluded, weakening the social contract, eroding trust in our multilateral system to deliver. Mr. President, the persistent call of the General Assembly over 3 decades to end the illegal embargo against the Cuban people has been ignored. The Cuban people are forced to carve out their sustainable development under the burden of the illegal, unilateral economic, commercial, and financial embargo. The new measures imposed by the past U.S. administration are now continued and widened by the present one during a pandemic are unbelievably cruel and inhumane. These measures bring suffering to millions of innocent people and do not reflect the goodwill of the people of the United States of America. Nevertheless, Cuba has made significant sacrifices to help other people in the world, including Belizeans. Our Palestinian brothers and sisters continue to suffer under an oppressive apartheid and illegal Israeli occupation. Belize fully supports the aspirations of the Palestinians for an independent state with its 1967 borders, with all attendant rights, including the recognition of East Jerusalem as its capital and the right of return. And the Sahrawi people are similarly being prevented from exercising their right to self-determination. We urge the relevant parties and the international community to support them in their efforts. Belize is also deeply concerned about the situation in Haiti and about the regional and global inaction to offer genuine and substantive program of support. We are alarmed at the inhumane treatment of Haitian refugees who are risking their lives traversing 2 continents for a better future. We therefore call on the UN to galvanize action of the member states and its development system to support the development of a Haitian-led resolution restoring its sustainability and security. Our multilateral system must also be inclusive, harnessing the capacity of all states to scale up international cooperation where it is most needed. Belize has benefited greatly from our diplomatic partnership with Taiwan that is based on the shared values of democracy, freedom, human rights, and the rule of law. Taiwan has provided tremendous assistance to Belize in terms of medical supplies and financial support, so Belize is better equipped in combating COVID-19 and conducting post-pandemic recovery. Belize calls for Taiwan's inclusion in the United Nations and its specialized agencies, which will not only further enhance global cooperation and partnership, but also manifest the United Nations' enshrined principle of universality. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is crystal clear that the confluence of crises facing the world can only be addressed through solidarity, international cooperation, and multilateral approaches. Let us not return to this great hall in September 2022 to lament further inaction. Let us not return next year to again decry unilateralism, nationalism, and failed collective action. No, Mr. President, we must move forward together. We can defeat COVID-19, but we can only do so together. We must save the planet from the irreversible effects of climate change, but only if we act collectively and urgently. Together we can reform the world's financial architecture to guarantee debt relief, make available affordable financing, and adopt a multidimensional vulnerability index. Together we must lift billions out of poverty and provide affordable housing, education, and health care. Failure is not an option. We believe in the power of humanity, in the noble spirit of mankind. We have confidence that we can and we will make the world a better place. The people of Belize, the citizens of the world, expect nothing less. Thank you.
Au nom de l'Assemblée générale, je tiens à remercier le Premier ministre et ministre des Finances, du Développement économique et de l'Investissement du Belize pour l'allocution qu'il vient de prononcer. Et je prie le protocole de bien vouloir accompagner son Excellence. L'Assemblée va maintenant entendre l'allocution de Son Excellence M. Alexander De Croo, le Premier ministre du Royaume de Belgique. Je prie le protocole de bien vouloir accompagner Son Excellence. J'ai le grand plaisir de souhaiter la bienvenue à Son Excellence M. Alexander De Croo, le Premier ministre du Royaume de Belgique. Meneer de Eerste Minister, u hebt het woord.
Mr. President, Excellencies, how encouraging to see the General Assembly meet in person again. When I stepped in, don't we all yearn to get back to normal? But is this sense of relief justified? And what is the normal we can actually hope for? Can we feel relieved when COVID-19 is still all around us and too many people are not vaccinated? Can we be relieved when, for a growing number of people, climate change is becoming a matter of life and death? Is there room for relief when human rights are being challenged in so many places? All over the world, people who are perceived as different are confronted with hate speech and hate crimes, with discrimination and with abuse. Can we really feel relief when the new normal for women and girls in Afghanistan is to go home, keep silent and stay inside? No, we cannot. Let me quote Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld, who was murdered exactly 60 years ago last week. The weakness of one is the weakness of all, and the strength of one is the strength of all. That is why Belgium remains strongly committed to multilateralism, to an international order based on the rule of law, the founding principle of our United Nations. Only through common action we will build common strength. Only through multilateralism we will provide long-term answers to today's complex crises. Which vulnerabilities then require our common action? I see three. The first vulnerability is COVID-19. We need to bring this pandemic to an end. It is now almost 2 years since our lives were turned upside down by an unprecedented health crisis. And I would like to express my deepest appreciation to healthcare workers in Belgium and elsewhere who continue to battle this deadly virus. Belgium is among the top vaccinated countries in the world. 85% of our adult population is fully vaccinated. But Belgium is also a leading exporter of 2/3 of all European exports. We are one of the world's vaccine powerhouses. By keeping trade lanes open and exporting over 530 million vaccines to the rest of the world, without ever imposing an export ban. If we are to overcome this pandemic, vaccines are a crucial condition, since no one will be safe until everyone is safe. That today less than 4% of Africa's population is fully vaccinated. As Hammarskjöld said, the weakness of one is the weakness of all. As long as the virus continues to circulate, the risk of new variants is there, and no one will be safe. COVAX is the best mechanism to strengthen vaccination solidarity and to close the global vaccination gap. Belgium has already donated 1.5 million doses, and by the end of the year we will donate a total of 4 million vaccines. With close to €3 billion pledged to COVAX, the European Union is one of its major donors. But we must do more. We must also boost local vaccine production through technology transfer and sharing of knowledge. That is one of Europe's objectives. At least €1 billion will be invested to this end. And as we speak, a Belgian private company is working with partners in Senegal to start local vaccine production. We also must prepare for the next pandemic, even if the present one is far from over. A new pandemic treaty will allow us to be better prepared, build resilient healthcare systems, and increase access to decent healthcare and quality medicine. And we need a transformed World Health Organization that is fit for purpose to lead these efforts. The coronavirus took the lives of nearly 5 million people, and it also had a devastating impact on our Agenda 2030. It halted and even reversed many of the recent positive developments. Extreme poverty is on the rise again for the first time this century. Economies were pushed into recession. Fragile countries were struck harder than others. Yet, giving up is not an option. As the Secretary General said in his report, Our Common Agenda, we must usher in an era of universal social protection. Not one country can cope with these unprecedented challenges on its own. That is why Team Europe is pooling efforts and resources to assist the most vulnerable countries. Belgium is proud to be part of this collective European effort. So let's not lose courage. Yes, we must build back. But we are faced with an important choice, an opportunity even. Do we continue with business as usual, or do we do things differently? Cela m'amène à une deuxième vulnérabilité qui requiert notre attention. La crise climatique et l'urgence nécessité de placer la durabilité au cœur de tous nos efforts. Le rapport publié le mois dernier par le groupe d'experts intergouvernemental sur l'évolution du climat est sans équivoque. L'augmentation de la concentration de CO2 et de la température mondiale est sans précédent. Toutes les régions du monde sont maintenant témoins des effets néfastes du dérèglement climatique, et plus rapidement que prévu. Cet été, l'Europe et mon pays ont été durement touchés par des conditions météorologiques extrêmes. Ce sont 41 de nos compatriotes qui ont perdu la vie lors de ces inondations, les pires qu'ait connu notre pays. Notre nation était sous le choc. Face à la brutalité des forces de la nature, nous étions nombreux à nous sentir tout petits. Nous allons reconstruire, mais ce ne sera pas suffisant. Nous ne pouvons pas nous croiser les bras et attendre les prochaines inondations, la prochaine vague de chaleur ou la prochaine sécheresse extrême qui tuera à nouveau. Nous devons agir et nous devons le faire maintenant. This makes the UN Climate Conference COP26 in Glasgow the most important meeting of the recent years. With the Green Deal, the European Union intends to be climate neutral by 2050 and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030. We hope that more countries will follow Europe's ambitions. This transition to sustainability is not only a cost, it is also a major economic opportunity. It triggers innovation and it drives new growth. It is the future our youth demands. That's why Belgium will double its wind energy capacity in the North Sea to remain one of the global leaders in offshore wind energy production. We will increase investments in renewables, and we have the clear ambition to become one of the most important hubs in clean hydrogen supply. Our common mission in Glasgow is crystal clear. We need to do whatever it takes to limit global warming to the Paris target of 1.5 degrees. Building the resilience of the most fragile countries will be an important part of this effort. That is why we must deliver our financing commitment of $100 billion, and why Belgium plans to increase its contribution to international climate finance. It is quite literally a matter of life and death. If we fail to act on the climate crisis, we will not only lose more lives, but global tensions, instability and insecurity will increase. This brings me to the third vulnerability, our international security. 20 years ago, the attacks of 9/11 did not only change this city, they changed the world. 5 years ago, my country was also attacked by terrorists. Like France, we are bringing terrorists to justice, but we have not defeated terrorism yet. Terrorists continue to claim innocent lives, as they did recently at Kabul airport. Belgium is one of the founding members of the coalition against ISIS. We actively participate in the fight against terrorism, with military deployment and with stabilization and reconstruction efforts through UNDP. Throughout the Sahel, our bilateral cooperation encompasses both defense and development. Indeed, security is not sufficient to ensure stability. And we cannot close our eyes to the aggravating humanitarian situation. The failure to prevent conflict often results in the failure to protect human dignity, with people losing everything. My country is a major humanitarian donor. Belgium's budget for humanitarian aid was €200 million last year. During our Security Council tenure, we attached great importance to humanitarian issues, such as humanitarian access to Syria. In the same vein, we will continue to help Afghan people with humanitarian aid. Belgium will do its part in line with our commitment announced last week in Geneva. The world cannot turn its back on the Afghan people. Yes, humanitarian assistance is necessary and needed to save lives, but only tents and food will not be enough. I see an important role in remaining close to the people of Afghanistan, to provide humanitarian assistance, but even more, to prevent the country from imploding. Turning our back on the Afghan people would come at a high cost. A population plunged into extreme poverty will fall victim to extreme ideologies or will do anything to leave the country. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, these three vulnerabilities, health, climate and security, are a threat to human rights and their universality. For Belgium, peace, security and development are not possible without a profound respect for human rights. In every crisis, in every war, women and girls suffer first and suffer most. We are concerned by the appointment of a Taliban government that does not reflect the political, religious and ethnic diversity of Afghanistan. Afghan women and girls are already bearing the brunt. They are tear-gassed, beaten, dismissed, locked up at home. We will continue to monitor their rights. They must be able to go to school, to work, to live their lives in freedom. Societies where women are respected and equally represented, where they thrive and become teachers, society leaders and CEOs, are stronger and more stable societies. 20 years ago, Belgium played a crucial part in the adoption of the Durban Declaration and Programme of Action. The fight against racism is of paramount importance to my government. Racism, anti-Semitism and all other forms of discrimination and intolerance are unacceptable. We need to challenge and end racial injustice. In doing so, we will shape a society that lives up to the promise of the fundamental equality of all human beings. The universality of human rights is the cornerstone of the modern international order. It is an essential obligation for all states. That universality is all too often questioned. More than ever, we need to reaffirm that human rights are not a favor. They are an obligation, everywhere, for everybody. Too many women and girls still fall victim to human rights violations. Same-sex relationships are still considered a criminal offense in too many countries. Belgium will continue to be a voice for LGBTI people. We will not let our guard down. For all these reasons, Belgium aspires to become a member of the Human Rights Council for 23-25. Mr. President, these global vulnerabilities threaten the very fabric of our societies, our ways of life. They can only be addressed by a collective answer based on a dynamic multilateralism. No one is safe until everyone is safe. It has become our guiding principle in fighting the pandemic. It is a present-day translation of Hammarskjöld pointing out that the weakness of one is the weakness of all. No one is safe until everyone is safe. Let this be our common objective when it comes to climate, security, and human rights as well. Let that guideline inspire our actions every day. I thank you.
Au nom de l'Assemblée générale, je tiens à remercier le Premier ministre du Royaume de Belgique pour l'allocution qu'il vient de prononcer et je prie le protocole de bien vouloir accompagner son Excellence. Je donne maintenant la parole, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, aux représentants de Saint Kitts et Nevis pour qu'il introduise l'allocution de la chef de son gouvernement.
Mr. President, Excellencies, I have the distinct honor and privilege to introduce a pre-recorded statement by the Honorable Dr. Timothy Harris, Prime Minister of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, distinguished delegates, it's my privilege and honor as the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis to address the United Nations General Assembly today. On behalf of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, I extend my Excellency Abdullah Shahid of Maldives, the Foreign Minister of a similar small island developing states, on his election to the presidency of the 76th session of the UN. I thank his predecessor for his valuable work during the 75th session and also take this opportunity to congratulate UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres for securing a second term. I pay tribute to his commitment and perseverance the UN family as best as possible through the pandemic. The theme of this is fitting. It reminds us that we must keep faith in multilateralism and international cooperation to achieve our goals and rebuild sustainably. The past 18 months have challenged everyone everywhere, convening once more to find global solutions to global problems. The battle against COVID-19 is not yet won, and its devastating impact on our societies and economies continues. That no one is safe until everyone is safe. That requires equitable access to vaccines and other medical products and technologies. I commend the for its response to calls for and it's a need to many countries. Facility established by the World Health Organization at the start. I also wish to thank our bilateral partners for their generosity with vaccines. St. Kitts and Nevis has 66% of its adult population fully vaccinated, and over 75% of the target population has received their. We are endeavoring to improve these in the near future. Our citizens responded selflessly to our calls for social distancing and adhered to the other COVID-19 protocols, playing an active role in the pandemic and helping us to overcome community spread. Healthy lifestyles remain fight against COVID-19, particularly as we continue to prioritize the delivery of health care to communicable diseases who, given their higher risks, are most vulnerable to the disease. The need to continue investing in a resilient health system and comprehensive public health services is paramount. Mental health and well-being are also vital, which is why we delivered a comprehensive provide psychosocial support through the National Counseling Center. Sadly, the economic impact of the pandemic will be felt for years to come. When it began, tourism, our biggest economic driver, ground to a halt, causing significant unemployment and underemployment. Businesses suffered as a result of lockdowns. We took action, providing social protection programs for those in need. Implemented an easy $120 million COVID-19 stimulus package. We reduced corporate income tax for employers who retained 75% of their workforce. VAT and import duty waivers for pandemic-related products. The impact of COVID-19 on development more widely, in particular, the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, has also been significant. But instead of walking away from them, we need to work collectively even harder to achieve them. Climate change and climate-related events continue the existence of small island developing states such as ours. As the climate crisis intensifies, we witness the erosion of coasts owing to rising sea levels, fisherfolk struggling to maintain their livelihoods from waning, families forced to relocate away from coastal areas due to the strength, intensity, and relentlessness of each past. Sustainable Development Goals number 13, 14, and 15 are of particular significance as they require us, among other things, to improve education and awareness of, as well as human and institutional capacity on climate change mitigation, adaptation, impact reduction, and early warning. A less negative outcome of the pandemic has been its effect in the digitization but not all countries and developing states have the infrastructure and workforce skills to fully benefit from this revolution. Rebuilding sustainably requires us to re-evaluate digital accessibility, affordability, so that every country, regardless of income level or geographic location, can exploit the digital economy in one properly networked world. Another barrier to development that we face is the criteria employed to determine aid and financial support. This singular development, GDP per capita, is critical, but sadly, due to bias and the omission of factors, it is, in my view, simplistic and flawed. It ignores vulnerabilities, and it prevents us from accessing critical development assistance. A set of more adequate and relevant measures encompassing social, environmental, climate-related, and economic factors should be used to regulate entitlements. The use of a multidimensional vulnerability index, for example, would be a far better judge of development than simply the protection of life from violent crime is also of fundamental importance, and discussions surrounding small arms and light weapons remain critical to our democracy. Our position remains that the uncontrolled illicit trade of small arms and light weapons has significant impacts on the health and well-being, human rights, and human citizen in the world. The new challenges faced as a result of technological developments must also be taken into consideration. We will also continue to lend our voice and support the work of the United Nations with a view to bringing about an end to the misery caused by these weapons. St. Kitts and Nevis prides itself on continuing to build strong alliances and increasingly expand our international footprint. Our diplomatic ties are founded on mutual respect for and adherence to strata, the rule of international law, and on the appreciation of the value of human life and dignity. For this reason, I call for the legal and financial embargo against Cuba, and I note the incalculable damage. During the last 4 years, for example, the blockade against Cuba has been reinforced. 240 coercive economic reaching unprecedented levels of hostility. The government and people of Cuba have contributed much to my country, the Caribbean, and indeed the world, especially during these unprecedented times. One can only imagine the potential of their contribution to the international community were the embargo to be lifted. Furthermore, I cannot address this august body and not recognize our dear friend, the Republic of China, Taiwan. St. Kitts and Nevis again renews its call for Taiwan's inclusion in the international community. We strongly believe Taiwan has an important and continuing role to play in strategies, given their great successes in so many areas. Taiwan has demonstrated that it can be a true partner in health, and we have seen its exemplary response to the pandemic firsthand in St. Kitts and Nevis and other parts of the world. My country looks forward to Taiwan being included in the United Nations system and its meetings, mechanisms, and activities. St. Kitts and Nevis is pleased that a few days ago we met to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the Durban Declaration and Program of Action. It is important for the world to be united against racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. Untold suffering and evil were inflicted on millions of men, women, and children of African descent, as a result of the transatlantic slave trade, colonialism, apartheid, and many of the other ills and other crimes against humanity. We welcome the establishment of the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent, which will serve as a consultation mechanism for people of African descent and other interested stakeholders, and as a platform for improving of people of African descent. We make, as other countries back in 2013, a clarion call for reparations and reparatory justice. We subsequently formed the CARICOM Reparations Committee and the establishment of the 10-point plan that outlines the path to reconciliation and justice for victims of crimes against humanity and their descendants. We hope that this meeting has evolved to pursue action to right the wrongs that are still manifested today. In conclusion, Mr. President, we're all in this together. My hope is that we will emerge from COVID-19 stronger and more united than ever before. There is no better place than this General Assembly to forge a path in order to build a better future for our children. We are indeed living in unprecedented times, and we have responded admirably so far. But we must continue to be proactive, relentless, resilient, and willing to share our ideas and resources as members of the same brotherhood of nations. We look, therefore, to the future and with great expectation. I thank you.
Au nom de l'Assemblée générale, je tiens à remercier le Premier ministre, ministre du Développement durable, de la Sécurité nationale, de l'autonomisation des personnes et des collectivités de Saint Kitts et Nevis pour l'allocution qu'il vient de prononcer. Mes chers collègues, Excellences, avant que nous terminions cette séance du débat général, je voudrais vous dire qu'une délégation a demandé à exercer son droit de réponse. Je rappelle aux membres que les déclarations faites dans l'exercice du droit de réponse sont limitées à 10 minutes pour la première intervention et à 5 minutes pour la seconde intervention, et que les délégations doivent prendre la parole de leur place. Je donne maintenant la parole à la représentante de l'Inde.
Mr. President, we exercise our right of reply to one more attempt by the leader of Pakistan to tarnish the image of this August forum by bringing in matters internal to my country and going so far as to spew falsehoods on the world stage. While such statements deserve our collective contempt and sympathy for the mindset of the person who utters falsehood repeatedly, I am taking the floor to set the record straight. Regrettably, this is not the first time the leader of Pakistan has misused platforms provided by the UN to propagate false and malicious propaganda against my country, and seeking in vain to divert the world's attention from the sad state of his country, where terrorists enjoy free pass while the lives of ordinary people, especially those belonging to the minority communities, are turned upside down. Mr. President, member states are aware that Pakistan has an established history and policy of harboring, aiding, and actively supporting terrorists. This is a country which has been globally recognized as one openly supporting, training, financing, and arming terrorists as a matter of state policy. It holds the ignoble record of hosting the largest number of terrorists proscribed by the UN Security Council. Mr. President, we marked the solemn occasion of the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 terror attacks just a few days back. The world has not forgotten that the mastermind behind that dastardly event, Osama bin Laden, got shelter in Pakistan. Pakistan leadership continues to glorify him as a martyr. Regrettably, even today, we heard the leader of Pakistan trying to justify acts of terror. Such defense of terrorism is unacceptable in the modern world. We keep hearing that Pakistan is a victim of terrorism. This is the country which is an arsonist disguising itself as a firefighter. Pakistan nurtures terrorists in their backyard in the hope that they will only harm their neighbors. Our region, in fact, the entire world, has suffered because of their policies. On the other hand, they are trying to cover up sectarian violence in their country as acts of terror. Mr. President, this is also the country that still holds the despicable record in our region of having executed a religious and cultural genocide against the people of what is now Bangladesh. As we mark the 50th anniversary this year of that horrid event in history, there is not even an acknowledgement, much less accountability. Today, the minorities of Pakistan, the Sikhs, the Hindus, the Christians, live in constant fear and state-sponsored suppression of their rights. This is a regime where anti-Semitism is normalized by its leadership and even justified. Dissenting voices are muzzled daily, and enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings are well documented. Mr. President, unlike Pakistan, India is a pluralistic democracy with a substantial population of minorities who have gone on to hold highest offices in the country, including as President, Prime Minister, Chief Justices, and Chiefs of Army Staff. India is also a country with a free media and an independent judiciary that keeps a watch and protects our Constitution. Pluralism is a concept which is very difficult to understand for Pakistan, which constitutionally prohibits its minorities from aspiring for high offices of the state. The least they could do is introspect before exposing themselves to ridicule on the world stage. Finally, Mr. President, let me reiterate here that the entire Union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh were, are, and will always be an integral and inalienable part of India. This includes the areas that are under the illegal occupation of Pakistan. We call upon Pakistan to immediately vacate all areas under its illegal occupation. Mr. President, allow me to be categorical about India's position. We desire normal relations with all our neighbors, including Pakistan. However, it is for Pakistan to work sincerely towards creating a conducive atmosphere, including by taking credible, verifiable, and irreversible actions to not allow any territory under its control to be used for cross-border terrorism against India in any manner. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie l'honorable représentante de l'Inde et je donne maintenant la parole pour 10 minutes à l'honorable représentante du Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. My delegation is exercising its right of reply in response to the statement made by the Indian representative. Jammu and Kashmir neither is a so-called integral part of India, nor is it India's internal matter. India remains in occupation of an internationally recognized disputed territory whose final disposition needs to be decided in accordance with the democratic principle of a free and impartial plebiscite under the United Nations auspices as provided for under numerous resolutions of the Security Council. In order to divert attention from ever-increasing international condemnation of India's widespread and escalating human rights abuses in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, India continues to level baseless allegations and rely on outright lie and obfuscation. India's compulsive obsession with Pakistan is neither new nor surprising. It has permeated its ruling elite and governance structures. But there is a method to this obsession, as it underpins India's electoral and foreign policy under the ruling RSS-BJP Hindutva-inspired government. The EU Disinfo Lab has graphically revealed how India has deployed such tools of deflection, deception, and disinformation against my country, including at the United Nations. Mr. President, India's violation of human rights in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir are well documented in the 2 reports of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Since 5 August 2019, the High Commissioner has urged India to unlock the situation and fully restore the rights that are currently being denied to the people of the occupied territory. Several special rapporteurs and mandate holders have also termed the human rights situation in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir in a, quote, free fall, unquote. Major human rights organizations, including Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, have expressed similar serious concerns about India's human rights violation, including in the occupied territory. Not surprisingly, Indian authorities have failed to respond to any of these communications. In fact, a witch hunt has been launched against those who dare to report these crimes. Only last year, Amnesty International ceased work in India, citing constant harassment at the hands of the government. The government of Pakistan has recently released a comprehensive and well-researched containing the entire range of gross, systematic, and widespread violations of human rights being perpetrated by Indian security forces in the occupied territory. We call upon the international community to take cognizance of the compelling evidence and hold India accountable for the heinous crimes. If India has nothing to hide, it must accept a United Nations Commission of Inquiry and agree to implement the Security Council resolutions stipulating a plebiscite to enable the people of Jammu and Kashmir to exercise their right to self-determination. Mr. President, as for India's use of the canard of terrorism, regurgitating stale arguments that are typical of all occupiers, let me emphasize that India itself is the principal perpetrator, sponsor, financer, and abettor of terrorism in the region. Today, India is involved in at least 4 different types of terrorism. First, India is resorting to state terrorism to suppress the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Since 1989, Indian occupation forces have killed more than 96,000 Kashmiris, widowed around 23,000 women, and used rape as a weapon of war and orphaned more than 108,000 children. Second, it is funding and supporting terrorist organizations like the TTP, which are involved in numerous cross-border terrorist attacks against Pakistani military and civilian targets. Over the last decade, thousands of Pakistanis have lost their lives or have been injured as a result of these Indian-sponsored terrorist attacks. Pakistan has shared irrefutable evidence of Indian involvement in supporting and sponsoring terrorism with the international community. Third, India is financing and organizing mercenary terrorist organizations against Pakistan to impede economic growth and prosperity of the region. India's National Security Advisor, Mr. Ajit Dole, has publicly admitted supporting and financing of such mercenaries. The captured Indian spy, Kulbhushan Jadhav, has also confessed to organizing such terrorism in Pakistan. Fourth, India is being guided by a supremacist ideology that has mainstreamed Islamophobia and bigotry against minorities, particularly Muslims, in its political discourse. The RSS is one of the oldest fascist movements in the world, enjoys state protection, patronage, and support by BJP, the ruling party in India. It was RSS which was responsible for pogrom in Gujarat in 2002, which killed over 2,000 innocent Muslim children, women, and men. These anti-Muslim pogroms were later repeated in Mumbai and Delhi. One cannot expect anything new from the purveyor of Hindutva. In today's incredibly intolerant India, the 200 million strong Muslim minority faces frequent lynching by cow vigilantes, pogroms by RSS thugs with official complicity, discriminatory citizenship laws to disenfranchise Muslims, and a concerted campaign to destroy mosques and the rich Muslim heritage of India. Mr. President, for the edifice of fascism is in an advanced stage of construction in India today. The Hindutva order of the ruling party has created an atmosphere of fear among all minorities, including Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, and Dalits. The Indian delegation would do well to reflect on the deeply troubling trajectory their state is embarked upon, rather than indulging in patent falsehood about Pakistan. India must realize that it has continuously and miserably failed to suppress Kashmiris living under its occupation from demanding their inalienable right to self-determination. I thank you.
Je remercie l'honorable représentante du Pakistan. Excellences, chers collègues, nous avons entendu la dernière intervention pour cette séance du débat général. Nous poursuivrons le débat général demain à 9 h du matin dans cette salle. Je vous souhaite une excellente fin de soirée et je déclare la séance levée.